Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking some incredibly powerful source material about something that honestly affects every single one of us: the sudden disruption of our carefully laid life plans. Think about how much we as humans absolutely crave certainty. We just love it. We love our structured plans, our daily routines, and knowing exactly what tomorrow, next month, and next year will look like. We spend years, sometimes decades, building careers, climbing ladders, establishing deep relationships, saving up for that dream house, and basically imagining this absolutely perfect trajectory for how our future will unfold. We practically write the story of our lives before it even happens, creating this little mental movie where everything goes exactly according to plan. But then, life changes the script. Just let that stark reality sink in for a second. You've probably felt that exact shock. It's that devastating moment when the floor simply drops out from underneath everything you thought was totally safe, guaranteed, and secure. And this disruption, well, it takes so many different painful forms. It could be a sudden job loss, right out of nowhere. Or maybe a long-term relationship abruptly ends when you thought you'd literally be together forever. Maybe an unexpected health crisis appears and completely changes your daily reality. Or even something we actually planned for, like retirement, completely upends our sense of identity and purpose. A loved one passes away, a business you poured your absolute soul into fails, a lifelong dream just collapses. In a single defining moment, the life we so carefully expected and mapped out no longer exists. Now, most people look at these disruptions purely as disasters, and yes, they are deeply, profoundly painful, for sure. But today, using the insights from our source material, we're going to explore a completely different possibility. Let's move into Section 1, the illusion of certainty. You know, we spend years, sometimes our entire lives, chasing this myth of a perfect life. We genuinely want an existence with zero problems, no major setbacks, and absolutely no heartbreaking disappointment. But the source text makes a blunt and necessary point here. Such a life simply doesn't exist. Disruption comes to absolutely everyone. There are literally no exceptions. The real question isn't whether disruption will come, but what we'll consciously choose to do when it inevitably arrives. And the stark truth is, the gap between reality and expectations creates suffering. This is an absolutely crucial concept to deeply understand. The agonizing pain we feel during a major life crisis often doesn't just come from the event itself. It comes from how tightly we cling to our old story. We just keep repeating in our heads over and over, "This is not how my life was supposed to go." We're constantly comparing our new, unwanted reality to our old, comfortable expectations. And that exact, measurable gap is exactly where the suffering lives, breathes, and multiplies. When we're stuck in that gap of suffering, the very first agonizing question we almost always ask is, why did this happen? It's a totally natural, understandable human response to pain. But here's the thing. Asking why keeps our focus entirely locked on the past. It keeps us fixated on the closed door, basically frantically banging our fists against wood that is never going to open again. We pour all of our emotional energy into what we lost and the perceived unfairness of it all, rather than looking at the hallway of options around us. Asking why simply paralyzes us in a state of victimhood. Now, what's really interesting here is that true growth actually begins the exact moment we stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and pivot our brain to asking, "What is this making possible?" That single, powerful question completely reframes the narrative. It's a real game changer. It takes what feels like absolute destruction and turns it into a blank canvas for creation. It forces the mind to stop looking backward at the rubble and start looking forward at the potential architecture of a totally new life. Okay, Section 2, Rethinking the Caterpillar's Crisis. The source material notes that sometimes life whispers, sometimes it speaks, and sometimes it absolutely shouts. Many of our greatest disruptions are essentially wake-up calls. They're life's remarkable, often jarring way of pushing us toward necessary growth that we were just too comfortable or too afraid to initiate ourselves. And this brilliantly illustrates how nature provides a visual metaphor for this uncomfortable process. Imagine a caterpillar. One day, its entire familiar world literally dissolves. Everything it knows about crawling on leaves and eating falls apart in the darkness of the chrysalis. If it could think, it would absolutely believe it was dying. But what looks like the catastrophic end of the world is actually the incredible creation of the butterfly. Many of our own life disruptions feel exactly like this. The old version of ourselves begins dissolving, and because we can't yet see what we're emerging into, we automatically assume something terrible is happening. But often, my friends, we are simply in the middle of becoming. Which leads us directly to the concept of reinvention. So many of us deeply fear this word because we falsely think it means discarding everything from our past and starting completely from zero, as if our past life was a total waste. But reinvention is not starting over. It's starting again with greater wisdom. Nothing you went through is wasted. Your prior experiences, your past mistakes, your previous successes, and even your bitterest failures, they all become the essential, rich raw material for your next chapter. The most successful and vibrant reinventions always build upon the solid foundation of what came before. Because every single disruption teaches us something invaluable that we couldn't have learned any other way. Hardship acts as a crucible, forging deep character traits that easy times simply cannot produce. Patience is born when we're forced to wait in the messy middle of a transition. Resilience is built only when we actually have to bounce back from a devastating blow. Humility is forged when we finally realize, hey, we aren't completely in control of the universe. Compassion deepens when our own suffering allows us to truly see the suffering of others, and profound wisdom is extracted from analyzing our missteps. The source material emphasizes a hard but inspiring truth. The people who emerge the strongest in life are not the lucky ones who successfully avoided difficulty. No way. They're the ones who deliberately extracted these exact lessons from their hardest, darkest moments. But here's a really critical distinction to keep in mind, and it's profound. Transformation begins when identity changes. The disruptive event itself, the shocking job loss, the scary illness, the painful breakup, that isn't the transformation. Losing a career might eventually reveal your true calling, or surviving an illness might reveal your ultimate life's purpose, but that only happens when you stop seeing yourself the old way. You just can't step into a new life wearing the exact same mental clothes as the old one. True second chances almost always require us to boldly adopt an entirely new identity. Consider the ancient myth of the phoenix, a magnificent bird that periodically bursts into flames and then rises from its own ashes. The symbolism here is incredibly powerful for our explainer today, because the phoenix doesn't avoid destruction, it transforms directly through it. The fire is literally the mechanism of its rebirth. Sometimes life just burns away all the things we thought we desperately needed to survive. Our certainty, our social status, our comfortable routines, our comforting illusion of control. And it feels terrifying to watch it burn. But what remains in those ashes is often vastly stronger, more pure, and significantly more authentic than what existed before the fire ever started. So, the crucial point is that second chances sound wonderful in theory, but in practice, they require immense courage. Reinvention absolutely demands uncertainty. You might need to learn totally new skills from scratch, drop old comfortable habits that kept you feeling safe, and actively go out and meet entirely new groups of people. Growth always asks us to leave something familiar behind, which feels inherently uncomfortable to our brains. Every meaningful transformation requires a true leap of faith into the unknown. All right, moving to section 3, 5 steps to reinvent. So how do we actually do this? How do we take this profound philosophical shift and make it intensely real and practical in our everyday lives? Let's move to and see how this builds into the 5 concrete steps outlined by the source material. Step 1 is to accept reality. You just have to stop fighting what has already happened. The past isn't changing, no matter how much you ruminate on it. If you lost the job, you lost the job. Acceptance is the firm ground upon which all new growth is built. Step 2 is to grieve what was lost. This is so crucial. Acknowledging your pain and sitting with the sadness isn't weakness. It creates the necessary emotional room for growth. If you don't grieve the old dream, it will silently sabotage the new one. Step 3 is to look for opportunity. This is that vital pivot we talked about earlier. Force yourself to ask what new possibilities exist right now that simply didn't exist before the disruption. For example, maybe losing that demanding corporate job is the only thing that could have freed up your schedule to start that small business you've been dreaming about for a decade. Step 4 is to take small actions. You don't need to change absolutely everything overnight. That's just paralyzing. Transformation begins with tiny, manageable steps. Just update the resume today. Just make one networking call tomorrow. Action creates momentum, and momentum cures fear. And finally, step 5, create a new vision. Stop focusing your mind's eye on what ended and focus your energy entirely on what could begin. Draft a new blueprint for your life that excites you, even if it scares you a little bit. Section 4, the hidden gift. When we look back at our lives with the immense benefit of hindsight, we often realize something truly astonishing. We realize that some of our absolute greatest blessings arrived perfectly disguised as terrible, agonizing disappointments. The door that slammed shut, the meticulously crafted plan that completely failed, the cherished dream that collapsed, at first, they just felt like devastating, unfair losses. But looking back years later, they were actually beautiful, strictly necessary redirections. Life wasn't destroying us, life was repositioning us. The disruption was never meant to be the tragic end of your story. It was merely the messy, uncomfortable beginning of a brilliant new chapter. And this is especially true as we age. History proves time and time again that the second half of life often contains vast, magnificent possibilities that the first half simply could not hold. That is the true hidden gift of a second chance. Not desperately trying to get our old life back, but boldly discovering a vastly better, deeper, and more purposeful version of ourselves. So if you're facing a major disruption right now, I want to leave you with this final thought. Don't just ask, what have I lost? Instead, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I becoming? Because sometimes life's greatest gift arrives wrapped in deep uncertainty. And sometimes what feels exactly like a tragic ending is actually the doorway to your most meaningful beginning. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a powerful new lens for your own second chances.